Hello everybody, it's HiroTheJapaneseTrain, aka Matt here.
And MasterOfTheLemons, aka Lemmy.
And today we thought we'd break from the recent string of sort of gritty, dark characters that we've had before.
Not that Hank is intrinsically dark, but we made him so. And I think that for the most recent episodes we've done, for whatever reason, halfway through the episode just got kind of dramatic and dark and a little cynical. Which I like, and generally we do like doing that sort of episode. However, I think it's time for us to do someone a little bit more upbeat and cheerful.
So we thought we'd lighten the mood a bit with characters that, honestly, Lemmy and I have not really devoted a lot of time into thinking about. This is Bill and Ben.
Yeah, it's this. Bill and Ben are really hard to talk about for me because I just the reason there's so many, dramatic, gritty ideas kind of thrown around on Character Gallery is because that's kind of what me and Matt do. Like, that's what we're interested in.
We seek out the characters that we think we're going to get something, like, impressive out of. And
yeah,
with Bill and Ben, I mean, even if you look at the Island of Soda, People, History, and Railways, it's just... it says they were built in 1948, the clay pits were founded in 48, and that's the end of it. They were just there ever since.
Yeah, and now they're just here on Edward's branch line and pull pranks on people, and that's it. And it's kind of like, there's no real drama or grit there, and that's kind of what we're interested in, right? Because I think we have this perhaps fallacious idea that an engine isn't really interesting or deep unless something kind of tragic or dramatic happens at some point in their life.
And that's why I think that Bill and Ben are really going to challenge us to sort of, figure out more about the clay pits, what we can come up with, and really sort of suss out their relationship with each other and the island as a whole in ways that are reflective of the TV series while also building upon it, and the Railway series, of course.
And I think that, we've just talked about them so little that, I've just never been a fan of Bill and Ben. I know they're fan favorites, but there's not a lot of depth to them, I think. And I think maybe we can... After this conversation, I'll be able to kind of see more depth, and there will be things that I can kind of glob onto and enjoy about them and like them as much as I do all the other characters. Because ultimately, I think I've given less time to Bill and Ben than anybody else in the show or the books. It's crazy how little I've thought about it.
Yeah, I'd be hard-pressed to find a character second to, Skiff that I've thought about less.
Yeah, even Skiff, I think I've probably thought about more than Bill and Ben.
Probably written more about Skiff.
Yeah, honestly.
Yeah, so I think that what'll really help orient this discussion is the history of Bill and Ben's siblings, Alfred and Judy.
So Matt and I have looked into Bill and Ben a lot recently to prepare for this episode because we really weren't sure what we were going to talk about. And ultimately... And we found out some really interesting stuff about Alfred and Judy at the Port of Par, because we always kind of assumed they were built at the same time and that they were just built for the Port of Par and that was that. So Judy comes along in, 1937 is when she's built?
37 is when Judy is built. Alfred is built almost 20 years later in 53.
Yeah. That's the weird thing, and that's what throws, I think, a lot of people off, is that these two engines were not built anywhere near the same time period. Judy came first, Alfred came 20 years later, which is just nuts. And so you have to wonder then, looking at that comparison, of course Bill and Ben being so similar to these two had to have been built by the same manufacturer. You have to ask the question, where do Bill and Ben fit in there? I could see it as this is coming together, because I think what could happen is... so essentially it's Bill arrives earlier than, these two are so hard to talk about.
Ben, Blil, Blen.
I find myself getting frustrated because I don't like talking about them. I really...
We'll carry on, it'll be okay.
No, I'm not convinced that it will be. I think we need to find some new angle, because I'm just not pleased with this. It's I just don't like them. What if I just don't like them? What if that's just something I have to accept? I've never had to accept that before. But what if I just don't like Bill and Ben?
Let me pick up some of the pieces here. So, I think one thing that is fascinating about the history about the China Clay Company itself is there are other characters in the CGI series and whatnot, the model series even, that join this sphere, Northwestern and from the SEC itself. Timothy is one of those characters. I would like to say that Marion would be in the clay pits pre-Bill and Ben, because I think as an American steam shovel during the First World War, probably she could have arrived sometime in the 20s after being delivered via the U.S. And so she would be there as a maternal figure by the time before Bill and Ben arrive. And then when Bill comes, I think it's interesting that they have a few years apart.
No, I got nothing. I don't.
I don't know how you're. This is crazy. You've never been stumped. This is character gallery.
I don't think I like Bill and Ben, Matt. I've never liked them. That's the thing. It's like these two. They're like the only characters, I think, that I've never had anything to say about. Like,
you know what? I think let's roll with that.
You think?
Why not?
Huh. How do we roll with that?
So, well, we have other things we can talk about with them.
All right. Well, how about this then? So, because I am quite frustrated with these two. I don't think that they are. I just don't have any interest in them. And maybe that's something to emphasize, you know? It's kind of like how people hate Billy because they think he's annoying. And so I think the way to fix that is to crank up the annoyingness to the point where, like, that's the point of Billy.
Right.
And so maybe the boringness of Bill and Ben, maybe the engines, maybe the other engines on the island, the reason that they're so annoyed with them is mainly because they don't think that they have a serious side. They think that they're just totally sheltered.
Right.
And they're just so cheeky that they don't, you know, they can't really get through to them in any respect.
Well, yeah, so let's focus on that, because I think that one of the things that defines Bill and Ben is just chronic boredom. And I think because every encounter we have with Bill and Ben is more about the other engines interacting with them than it is about Bill and Ben, unless it's like Buff or Bother.
That's true, isn't it?
It is. There's not much about them.
And the few times we see Bill and Ben, like, kind of on their own, it's like heroes, and it's like, you know, they're just talking about how boring it is here when they're just, the two of them are here alone.
Or they're just bickering.
Yeah.
Like, I think that, you know, the CGI series does a great job with Bill and Ben because, I think not because of Bill and Ben, but because they add Timothy to the mix.
Yeah, they never have Bill and Ben alone, which is a good idea, because when they're alone...
Right.
Here's the thing. I think the reason that Bill and Ben are boring to me is because generally, you know, when the two of them are alone together, well, there's no difference between them. So it's like having just a character alone with themselves talking to themselves.
And they just bicker. You know, it's not. You know, there's a difference between bickering that kind of leads to something in the story, but with Bill and Ben, it's mostly just bickering for the sake of bickering.
Yeah, and they just bicker, and then it never goes anywhere, and it just repeats over and over again. There's never any development with these two. I never really see any of that. And so it's like, I think that's kind of, there's this general hopelessness that they'll never really kind of change their behavior.
And that's why it's always great when they have someone to push around. And I think that's great that Timothy filled that role, because think about the engines that they're with. You know, for most of their working life at Brendam, they're surrounded by these really calm, quiet, collected, some of the coolest minds in the British Isles.
Yeah. They've got Edward and Boko and Salty and just all
so
these characters.
So when Thomas and Gordon come along, it's the funniest thing ever.
Yeah, because they're just whenever you bring in a character that is just easily frustrated or just easily kind of annoyed, Bill and Ben are just so good at pushing buttons that it's just like it's fascinating to witness what happens, because it's like a power keg.
Right.
They're I almost wonder if it's very good luck that Bill and Ben are kind of isolated on this little branch in that they've got all of Edward's branch line in between the main line and them. because that means that it's very difficult for them to go and cause trouble.
Yeah.
They're kind of in the best possible place. It's kind of like if you've got a very mischievous teen, so you send them out to like live with their grandparents out on the farm and kind of like learn a lesson.
Well, yeah, and new engines would come to the island and only hear of Bill and Ben for a long time before meeting them. I can imagine that. Like Thomas is showing a new engine around. It's like, oh, that's the junction for the Brenda branch. Watch out for Bill and Ben. And then the other engine's like, oh, why? What did they do? And Thomas just goes,
It's so ominous. God,
I could see that because when Bill and Ben when Gordon comes all the way down there, they just know what buttons to push, and they probably pick it up from Edward. They don't pick it up from Gordon. Bill and Ben are going to be flies on the wall to everything. Edward is talking to Boko about Gordon and his brothers and Scrap and stuff like that. So when Gordon comes down the branch, Bill and Ben are like, "Hey, let's mess with this guy."
Yeah. I don't know, man.
We can do Bill and Ben, then we never have to do them again.
But that's what I worry about, Matt. I don't want to waste them if I'm not enjoying it. It's like, because what if I find the key to Bill and Ben like a year from now, and I'm like, oh my god, that's what makes them cool. I should have known.
We'll add an addendum.
I don't know. I've never felt this way about any other characters on Character Gallery. I've always had something to say about them. I really wonder what the core of this is. Why do I just find them so boring?
I mean, I kind of do too.
Yeah, but it's easier for you to say stuff about them, I think.
Well, I'm just thinking of what we've seen with Bill and Ben, because
I feel like every other episode has a lot of meaning to it, and I just feel Bill and Ben feel kind of meaningless.
I think that is their meaning.
How so?
I think for once, they don't need to be overanalyzed.
Ooh.
I think for once, Bill and Ben
are exactly what they look like.
They're exactly what we think they are.
How do you tell a story about that? They're just... Oh. I think you're right. That's the problem. Oh.
I think... Here's the thing is...
Are we just gonna upload this? Just me frustrated about Bill and Ben? We never come up with any ideas. It's just me venting about how you can't do anything with them. God.
You know what you could also... I mean, you think about the characters that they've talked to. Think about Bill and Ben during dieselization. You have Boko, Derek. They don't go after them because they're diesels necessarily. They have this immature construct of what dieselization really is.
I think it's also... I think that's what I would expect, but maybe on the other side, maybe Bill and Ben just aren't fazed by a lot. Maybe there's nothing that really scares them or makes them sad.
I think Bill and Ben... Right. I think...
They only have two modes, which is annoyance and mischievousness. And so ultimately, it's like they're not... like when dieselization happens, I could see them marching over to the other railway and pulling pranks on them. Think about how they respond when a diesel comes to their yard and takes their trucks. They're not scared. They understand what's happening, but they're not like, they're worried he's going to magic them away. That's what they're worried about. They're worried about it for stupid reasons.
Yeah.
They're not worried about him replacing them. That's not what they're really worried about. So they
don't have a grasp on what it really means. And I think that if
that's the thing. I think they do, and they don't care. Like, that's kind of what the sense that I'm getting. Because I think that everyone assumes that they are just ignorant, and I'm not sure that they are. I think we're just assuming that because it's under, like, we're kind of operating under the assumption that no engine would ever act the way they do if they had a clear picture of the world. But maybe they do. Maybe Bill and Ben...
I think the one thing about Bill and Ben, and I think that's why they are stumping us, is because they don't have vulnerabilities.
They really don't. What are their weaknesses?
Well, that's the thing. That's the thing about every other episode of Character Gallery, is that it's either been about a character's weaknesses or other engines' weaknesses, or something that they've gone through.
Yeah, no, it's always about that. What have Bill and Ben gone through? What struggles have they had? Nothing. That's kind of and that's against the Sodor spirit too, because everyone who comes to Sodor is some sort of survivor. They come to Sodor because they're running away from something, but Bill and Ben come to Sodor because they were built in 1948 and arrived immediately after they were built. They went through nothing.
That's the thing about Bill and Ben. They've also, the fact that they are owned by the China Clay Company, they're never fully within the fold of the Northwestern. They don't really fit into that culture. And I think that to many engines on the Northwestern, Bill and Ben are bugs for that reason. They're not really part of this communal suffering. So there's when Bill and Ben are involved, it's just, oh God, they're not really,
I guess, okay, so maybe what we need to do is introduce a crisis.
Okay.
So what if the clay pits was shut down? We don't usually get into just hypotheticals. Usually when we
we have precedent. I mean, what happened after Heroes?
It was shut down.
Yeah.
Say the clay pits were shut down.
You mean like closed?
Yeah, totally. The company goes bankrupt. They don't need the engines anymore. Okay, I can work with this. This I can see.
Also, the China Clay will dry up. It will run out. It's a finite
good.
resource.
Say that the clay pits dry up. Say that there's no more clay. All the clay is gone. No clay. So
and Bill and Ben get magicked away with the clay.
Oh God.
Lady descends from heaven, is like, your job is done here.
They just pop out of existence. Edward's like, no.
But then they only exist in Gordon's mind.
God, no! That would actually be an amazing show. It's just Gordon with Bill and Ben tagging along in every thought he has. He's like, damn it, leave me alone! And Henry's like, Gordon, are you okay? No, I'm not! Bill and Ben can't agree on what train I should take. What? But I could honestly work with this. So let's introduce a crisis then, because I don't know if I do well outside of crisis. Right. So say that the clay dries up, and say that Bill and Ben now are going to be scrapped or sold or something, right? How do they respond to this situation? And what I also want to think about is, how does Edward respond? How does Boko respond? How does everyone on the railway respond when they know that Bill and Ben are in danger of being scrapped or sent away?
I think Bill and Ben themselves would respond, I think, initially destructively.
You know what I kind of like to think? Because here's the thing, we never see Bill and Ben really shaken. Not really. They've always kind of got the upper hand in a lot of ways. Wouldn't it be cool if everyone on the island is really worried about them? Like, oh my God, they're going to be scrapped. And Edward's like,
And they're not worried about themselves.
Yeah, they're just kind of like, they're just kind of like, well, Ben, looks like we're in trouble. And Bill's just like, yeah, well, seems so.
That would be great. Like, imagine a scene where it's like an indignation meeting has been held. Edward's around the turntable begging the other engines to stop fighting, and for once we need to save Bill and Ben. Yeah. It's super intense. And Bill and Ben are just outside the shed. Yeah. They're like filling up at the water tower.
They just roll casually into the sheds. There's like tons of engines here, all fighting about the best way to kind of help them. And Bill and Ben just roll right into the party. And they're like the last ones to arrive, and Edward's like, "Where have you two been? We've been trying to
They're the last ones to arrive. Like, Ben's paint is like skinned off on one side because they decided to go through the tunnels too fast.
God damn it!
I don't know.
But I think it would be more like they arrive almost near the end of the meeting, and they've just been taking their sweet time. And Bill and Ben arrive, and Edward's just like, "Where have you two been? We need to."
We've been worried sick about you.
And Bill and Ben are just like, "Well, you needn't be. We've got this covered, Edward." And Edward just kind of cocks an eyebrow. Like,
why does that conjure the thought of like the China Clay manager like tied up with a duct tape over his mouth?
God damn it, it does though. But I feel like this is how they would deal with this situation though. Everyone in the sheds would be like, what?
This is so bizarre. They're like the penguins of Madagascar.
Yes, that's what they should be.
That's what they are.
That's what it is, because it's like Bill and Ben, I could so see them, everyone on the island is worried about what's going to happen to them but them, because they've got this covered.
Ben analysis.
And because we usually see them just playing pranks, right? Like their jokes don't have to be deep. They don't have to be meaningful. Usually they're just being cheeky and that's that. However, in this situation, I think that they can use those tactics, those skills of being able to play excellent pranks on people and get the better of people. They can use them to save their own lives.
And
they do that here. Like, they actually can engineer a situation on the island.
They're manipulative, too. Like, they get their... in Bill or Ben, there's precedent for this, is that, like, I forget who it is I think Bill was not supposed to be painted blue. He goes in, and he's like...
Yeah.
You know...
Yeah, exactly.
He's able to, like... Yeah, with his silver tongue, he gets himself painted blue.
Yeah, and it's like, I think that they could engineer a series of situations on the island that eventually gets them, like, bought by the cement company or something. Like, they figure out how to find themselves a new home and convince, like, I'm just imagining they target, like, all the board of directors of the cement company. And they essentially, like, they
round them up.
Yeah, they, like, stall one of their trains at a certain time.
That'd be so funny if, like, the gentleman of the railway board, all these directors are going to, like, this conglomerate meeting, and, like, Gordon's pulling the train. Bill and Ben stop at either end on the main line.
Yeah, oh my god. I think maybe what would happen, this is what I like. In the meeting, Gordon's being a jerk, and he's just like, "Oh, well, good riddance if you ask me. I mean, what use are they to anyone?" And he doesn't mean it, but, like, he's saying that, right? So it gives precedent to then kind of screw him over later. Because what happens is Bill and Ben make a plan. And so essentially Gordon one day is taking a train full of important, the board of directors of the cement works, all these important people. And then maybe Bill knocks over the water tower or something at Bakerstown, so Gordon can't fill up. And he's like, "I guess I'll have to go without it." Something like that, right? And then Ben's on the other side of the island with with the points diverted or something. And there's, like, this whole complicated situation. And eventually it transpires with Gordon ending up stalled on the main line with no water. And, and this whole train of important people desperately need to get to Tidmouth, but there's no one to pull them. And that's when Bill and Ben slink alongside, and they're like, "We can take your train if you want."
They have brake vans.
Yeah, and it's like, and ultimately that, I'm thinking more like Gordon gets taken off the train, and then they get on either end and push and pull the train all the way to the big station. Yeah. And then the board of directors is like, "Oh my god, these engines are amazing. Who owns you?" And they're like,
"Oh, wait, like, they don't see it, but Ben is, like, the jet engine."
God damn it. Like, it's like, yeah, like Bill and Ben are not at all strong enough to take the express to the station.
But they go at express speed.
Yeah, like, because, like, Bill just steals the jet engine and just rockets across the island, and they don't realize it. They just think they're really strong, awesome engines, and they're like, "Wow." And so, wouldn't it be great if they pull into the station, right? Bill quickly hides the jet engine, and then
he pushes it into a siding. You just hear a loud crash.
Yeah, Duck is just in the goods yard, like, "Damn it!" and so then the board of directors comes out onto the platform and addresses Bill and Ben, and they're like, "Wow, I can't believe you got us here in record time. Who owns you two?" And I imagine that, like, kind of, like, the world's smallest violin begins to play, and Bill and Ben kind of start, like, fake crying, and they're like, "Oh, it's so sad. No one owns us now."
I could see that, like, Bill is using his silver tongue, and Ben is just crying, fake crying the entire time.
Yeah, exactly. And the whole Cement Works board of directors, it just feels so bad for them. They're like, "Oh, but such good engines to go to waste." Edward's on the other side of the station, not sure whether to be proud of them and impressed or very disappointed and annoyed. He's just kind of there, just like, "Oh my god, this is working." And so ultimately the board of directors finally decides, "You know what, we're going to buy these two engines." So they contact the clay pits, and they buy Bill and Ben, and they bring them to work with Fergus, and they work at the cement works.
Do you think they become blue then?
I don't know if that's the cement works' color. I think that's just what Fergus happens to be.
Do you think they would just stay yellow?
Yeah, I think they'd get rid of the Brendan Bay in the SEC, though.
Yeah.
I think it would be just, straight up, just yellow at that point, which would be kind of neat to see.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I think that would just be so great if, like, I mean, the structure of that story would be great because You know, the news would be, Bill and Ben would get the news. Then there would be this big meeting at Tidmouth because everyone cares about them. They slowly sidle in, and it's not a big deal to them at all. And then they just, the whole story, they are convinced that they're going to come out on top, and they do by the end of the story. And it's like they never waver the whole story. Like they have a plan, they execute it, and they find a new home. And you almost, maybe there's like a line at the end of the story where you like that kind of suggests they might have done this before. Like this happened on the mainland at some point, and then they manipulated and pulled the strings to end up at the China clay pits. So like they've been to other railways, and whenever the work dries up, they pull the strings so they end up at another quarry. That could be a possibility.
Yeah, I think it's their invulnerability that is really significant about Bill and Ben, and the fact that they can weasel in and out of any situation.
Yeah. That's the thing. It's like the fact that they aren't phased, that they can understand the gravity of a situation, and yet they don't, it doesn't destroy them like it does a lot of engines. Like when Toby's work dried up on his old tramway, he was devastated and terrified. When Gordon lost, his family, or when Gordon was taken off the express, those are devastating moments.
Bill and Ben realized the moments that other engines wish that they could have when they lost everything. Like, yeah. Oliver's escape is kind of a similar thing to what Bill and Ben do, except Oliver probably had to go through a lot of grief and suffering before he was like, all right, I'm finally escaping. Bill and Ben would have just done it the first night.
Yeah, they would have, like, without question. That's kind of scary to have these two engines working for you.
If a Diesel spotted them, they would have, like, shoved it in the siding.
Yeah, they would have, or they would have done, I'm imagining just such a, they would like
have dragged a line of Diesels with them.
I think what it would have been, I don't think they'd use physical violence. I think that they would more trick them. They would I'm imagining kind of the way that like Bugs Bunny will dress up as different characters.
That's a really good analogy. Yeah, Bugs Bunny.
Like that's kind of what they do. It's like Bill would show up on one side. Maybe he'd like get himself covered in coal or something, and then he'd be like, spare some change, and he's like pretending to be like Oliver Twist or something, and this Diesel's like, oh, you poor thing, and then Ben comes up on the other side. Something like that, where they manage to like kind of...
They would literally be like rogues. They would be rebels. They would like... I could see this Diesel's coming down with this train of coal, and they're running low. And so they do this whole setup, and then Bill comes out on the other side, like, I'll need 2 trucks, please.
There's this video I saw the other day. I don't know if you've seen it. It seems like the type of thing you might have seen, but maybe by chance. A man comes home to his apartment, and there's his landlord there, and he's asking him for the payment. And then the man basically does a bunch of chalk work on the wall to kind of calculate how much he's gonna... Because his landlord says, you owe me like $300.
Oh,
yeah. And the man is like, oh, no, I only owe you $17 here. And he like messes and fudges with all the calculations, and it always ends up as $17, but because he's like cheating with the math, and the landlord's like, well, that can't be, and then try it this way, but he always finds a clever way to rewrite it in such a way that it's like it ends up looking the way he wants it to. That's kind of the feeling I get with Bill and Ben. It's like they're just perfect bullshitters. They would be excellent used car salesmen. They would just be perfect at that. Like,
well, and this is why come down to Bill and Ben's used cars.
God damn it.
We promise they all have brakes.
Oh Jesus, no. God.
Edward goes by. Ah!
Oh God.
I could really see. I think that's one of the great things about Bill and Ben is, again, it's this unflinchingness when they need it, and when they don't need it.
I think Bill and Ben are always kind of prepared to go into war. It's like, but in the sense that in the very cartoony type of war, where it's like you do realize this means war. It's that sort of thing where it's like
they're the road runner.
Yes, they are. They're every one of those cartoon characters that just escapes situations in a very clever, cheeky way. That's who Bill and Ben are. They're just so good at like avoiding conflict while at the same time totally acknowledging it. The Roadrunner knows that he almost got crushed by a boulder, but he doesn't freak out about it. He doesn't panic. He doesn't have a crisis.
And what's funny is their charisma is also contagious because like, Timothy, an engine who has been screwed over by Bill and Ben so many times, still does their bidding.
Yeah, because
time and time again. Like he looks for the rainbow truck. Even though he already knows.
I think to an extent, engines, whether they admit it or not, they can't help but respect Bill and Ben. Because Bill and Ben are so unflinchingly themselves, and no one can really push them around or make them act differently. And
Right.
if you try, if you're nice to them, then they'll play a few pranks, but everyone will laugh at the end of the day.
And that's why Edward and Boko are perfect for them, because Edward and Boko realize you can't change them.
Exactly. They accept them for who they are, and so Bill and Ben get along great with them. They play pranks, but that's just because that's their type of fun. And I think on some level, maybe that's why Bill and Ben bicker, is because it's not really negative. It's like, it's their default.
It's
like
just
that.
keeping up the excitement.
Yeah, exactly. It's like they kind of want to play devil's advocate, and they want to kind of bicker with each other, not because they genuinely don't get along, but because that's their way of showing love almost. It's like it keeps things interesting.
It's like those two brothers that always spend their time play fighting. Like they roughhouse all the time because that's just how they bond.
Exactly. And so when they do the same thing to Edward and Boko and Salty and even Cranky, they understand that isn't an insult. That is them showing their love. That is the fact that Bill and Ben like them.
It's kind of small, but like in one good turn, I always thought it was a little puzzling how when Bill and Ben are heading it towards each other head on, Ben just starts grinning. I think it's kind of like that.
Yeah, and I think it fits there. That's oh, wow. Okay, so I like this now. You rescued it, but only just. My God, in the nick of time. I was about to hate Bill and Ben.
Don't hate Bill and Ben.
Oh, God, only you could make me like them, Matt. Because I swear to God, it's like I've always found them so boring. But this is it. This is the way to approach it. Because I've always thought they're devoid of drama. They're devoid of understanding of the darker sides of life. But
I think when I said the penguins of Madagascar, it really created a shift in my head.
Yes, that's exactly what they are.
Because I had to get on that level of humor.
Exactly. Because it's like, it's the fact that it's like Bill and Ben cope with the seriousness of Sodor and the world and all the big issues that everyone deals with. They cope with them differently than everybody else. Everyone else either denies them because they're afraid of them, or they acknowledge them forthright, and so they're very dark, cynical characters. Bill and Ben know it's dark, but they kind of laugh in the face of it, which is very rare on Sodor.
I think it's hilarious that through all this, we've kind of implicitly acknowledged that the Fat Controller is kind of keeping himself distant from owning Bill and Ben.
My God.
But understands they will be alright.
Yeah.
Because if he had them on his railway, he would be responsible for everything they got up to.
Yeah. It's like this weird kind of middle ground where it's like he wants them to be okay, but also if he just outright bought them and fixed this, say when if the clay pits shut down. I don't want them to ever shut down. I wouldn't do that.
But it says what would happen if they did.
Yeah, it's like a good hypothetical to kind of show us like how do Bill and Ben actually respond to conflict, and I think we finally have our answer, which is very well. They can deal with it, quite easily, and treat a dire situation like it's a joke, and just laugh in the face of it. I could see Bill and Ben like literally meeting the Grim Reaper and then playing pranks on him and like getting him to go back to hell somehow. Like that's who Bill and Ben are. And I think when dieselization rolls around, they know exactly what's happening. They know what's going on. But at the same time, they just aren't freaked out by it in the slightest. I think maybe in a way, it's because Bill and Ben kind of always have each other's backs. They bicker, they argue, they do all that, but it's like, when the chips are down and they've got to deal with some big bully, or they've got to deal with a big problem like the clay pits shutting down, they are in each other's heads. They don't
have the emotional burden that Donald and Douglas have, because by being unfazed, they don't get traumatized.
And I think too the fact that Bill and Ben, on some level, they're really not loyal to anybody. And that sounds like a bad thing, but it really isn't. It's just like that's not how they process relationships. And so they don't have any loyalty. And that's the thing I think that made Donald and Douglas so vulnerable. Because they were loyal to their old railways. And then they were totally betrayed and their whole families were scrapped. And it was devastating, right? Bill and Ben, if the clay pits turned on them tomorrow, they'd be like, well, time to go on the run again. And they're a little bit excited about it. They're kind of like, all right, a new chapter in our lives. I think ultimately, like, they have friends, right? But I don't think they have loyalty to railways.
They're one of the few engines that could die with a smile on their face.
I could honestly see that, where it's like, you know...
Like, if you know, life finally caught up to them and Bill or Ben were, you know, finally scrapped.
Yeah, I think that they would be like, you know, it was one hell of an adventure, you know, and that would be what they would think about. That would be what they would focus on.
Their life is just one never-ending joyride.
Exactly. That's really what it is, you know. And even the hardest of times, they get through with a smile on their face because they grab life by the horns and just, you know, just have as much fun as they can in any given situation. And the thing is, life is so much less scary when you just laugh at every struggle that comes your way.
And, you know, I think that you made a very good point that engines like Toby would be very envious of a life like that because...
Yeah, really.
Without any strings attached, without anything to tie you down, like, it's such a great life, even if on the edge.
This is the key to Bill and Ben, I think, at least for me enjoying them. Is that I think they're, like, fearless, you know? Like, they really, you know, we kind of look at them, I think we tend to look at them like these little kids that just are, you know, are on the playground and they really don't know all that much about the world.
And that's the bias of all the other engines around them talking. The bias that says they're just bugs.
Yeah, when in reality, Bill and Ben have got it down pat. They know what the world is like. They know that their clay pits could shut down. They know that scrap is a thing. They know that all of these things can happen, but they're just prepared for them, you know, and it's like they don't fixate on them. You know, they're just like, in the moment, let's have fun. And if we can't have fun, all right, pull out the big guns and get us to another railway. But once that happens, the fun begins again, you know, and it's like that's always their focus. They don't take anything seriously, and that makes their lives a lot easier than everybody else's, which is awesome.
James's first response to Boko was suspicion and you know, disgust. Bill and Ben's, their response to Boko was, let's see how far we can push this guy.
Yeah, exactly. You know, they ran towards him. James ran away from him. And that's, like, the fascinating thing. Bill and Ben run toward danger because it could be exciting, because it could be fun. And because, above all else, think about Bill and Ben, they're daring. They want to go and live their lives and do things. And fear isolates you. Fear forces you to stay inside and not confront the world. Bill and Ben, that would be their worst life.
And, like, any given day, they would just storm the steamworks when Victor's, like, there. And they would just, like, they would do what the Diesels did in Day of the Diesels, just... for the hell of it.
Yeah, and throw a party, too. Imagine that. Imagine Bill and Ben throwing a party in the steamworks, and then, like, they bring everyone in. There are, like, strobe lights.
There's some engines that from the mainland that no one knows.
Kevin is mouth duct taped in the closet, and then Victor comes home, and he's just like, what is going on here? And Bill and Ben are just like, cheese it, and they run out the door.
Everyone scatters. Scarloey is there for some reason.
God damn it, he's not, like, on a flatbed, and he's like, this wasn't as fun as I thought it would be. And it, like, they've literally, like, the Flying Scotsman is there, City of Truro. Just imagine that, Bill and Ben's amazing, huge, just, you know, bashes, you know, that, like, I could just so see them throwing amazing parties.
Bash and Dash are, like, off the rails in the corner.
Oh my god, that's perfect. Still having a blast. Ferdinand's trying to get the breakdown crane, but he can't get back there because it's, like, an awkward corner. Oh my god, Gordon's there, and Victor would come into the building, and he'd be like, wait, Gordon? And Gordon would be like, I got lost. I'm not here on purpose.
I'm not supposed to be here.
God damn it.
I'll see myself out.
Just imagine that, though. The Steamworks would be the perfect place to throw a party like that. Like, there's so much space. Everyone could just have the time of their lives, and Bill and Ben would be, like, up on the engine lift crane thing that's kind of swinging around the whole works. Or maybe they, like, attach a disco ball to that, and that will just kind of move around the whole room. Oh, that would be perfect. Yeah, this is I think. No, I quite like Bill and Ben now.
Good. I'm glad that I have helped you like Bill and Ben.
Yes. Well, it's because it's the Penguins of Madagascar thing. That is really the thing that invoked this. Because that is exactly the same kind of genre and tone of comedy that they are. This whole framework for Bill and Ben does imply that they can move around the island a lot more freely than perhaps would be realistic. I'm okay with that because I think that fits them as characters, is that they would constantly be coming up with very clever, cheeky excuses for how to get off of Edward's branch line. I'm seeing Edward a bit kind of like their kind of overprotective mother that's like, you've got a curfew, you simply can't.
I do think any time that we see them on the main line, they've escaped somehow.
Yeah, they're sneaking out their bedroom window, using a bunch of bed sheets tied together to get down to the ground floor and run away to the local party. And then Edward comes up to their room and he's like, "What are you two? Oh no, Boko!" And then the two of them have to kind of drive around town tracking them down. That's really what it is.
Yeah.
Is what that dynamic is. It's essentially, they've kind of got to they've got to sneak out, and they're very good at it too. Wouldn't it be shocking to find out? Like, imagine, because the way the Brendan Peninsula is designed, you've got Edward's branch line that sweeps down along the eastern side of it, and then wraps back up with the Soto China Clay line. What if Edward finally journeyed to the clay pits and found out that they've built this ragtag line along the western coast that converges at Wellsworth Station somewhere? There's like bushes covering up the entrance.
The reason that Alfred and Judy were built is because they're these tiny locomotives that can fit under the tightest tunnels and the smallest corners and stuff, only that they could fit under. They'd have a honeycomb of lines that Edward couldn't get to if they needed to run away from him.
Yeah, they totally could do that. I imagine that down in the mines, they've got a little area with a turntable and just like kind of a... Like that's kind of their little secret clubhouse. And so it's like Edward can't get down there. You can hear, like, they're down there snickering to each other.
You can hear
And you can hear Edward shouting down, just like, "You two come out here right now! What did you do to the mayor?" And then Bill and Ben are just like, "We're not coming up, Edward. We're having a special meeting in our secret clubhouse." And
Fergus would come by with his funnel removed.
Oh God.
"I'll handle this."
Edward, yeah, exactly. Edward would have to go to the cement works, be like, "Fergus, I hate to ask this of you."
"Take off your funnel."
Fergus is just like, "If that's what's necessary, that's what I'll do, Edward." And he's like, takes it off with way too easily. It's removed by workmen. Like this has happened before. Like he's designed for this. And then he goes down there, and Bill and Ben are like, "Oh no, it's Fergus, cheese it!" And they like just get out of there, and he has to chase them around in the little kind of the kind of
Scooby-Doo way.
Yes, the Scooby-Doo way. That's the theme of this. I think Bill and Ben, to do them right, they need to be cartoony in nature, and that's really, I think, the missing piece. That's really what I needed in order to really enjoy them. And God, I actually like Bill and Ben now. I haven't for like pretty much my whole life. I've had no interest in these two, and that has changed today. It once again showing the incredible healing power of character gallery.
Right.
But anyway, so I think we've said more than enough about these two. I think that it's definitely changed the way that I think about them, and I think that we've come up with a lot of great ideas that could make them just very, very interesting and kind of utilize elements of them that we're all familiar with, but that could really be taken to their logical extent.
Bill and Ben throughout the series have always said more about the engines around them than themselves, and I'm really happy that we actually isolated them and were able to dive into what makes them so great, and also what made them really frustrating.
Yeah.
To sort of crack
really.
That.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just the fact that I always approach these characters with drama in mind. It's like what kind of thing, what really shakes them to their core is kind of, what is their greatest weakness? It's like in the first episode where we had all those characteristics, and one of them was, what is their greatest flaw? And it's like, that's kind of what I think of first, is what are their weaknesses? And Bill and Ben don't really have any. That's kind of what makes them awesome, is that they laugh in the face of any weakness. And so they're not really afraid of being weak at times. They just focus on their strengths.
The reason that they've been frustrating is because Bill and Ben don't fit into our usual character gallery shtick.
Yeah, they break the mold, which I think is perfect. It's like they have caused ultimate mischief on our show.
Yes.
Like there's nothing more perfect than that. I'm very pleased with this conversation. I think that it has changed the way I look at Bill and Ben for sure.
I think that, yeah, and I think that's an excellent way to cap it off. Is that they are the penguins of Madagascar. They are the Bugs Bunny. They are the immortal cartoon character of Thomas. And
Exactly.
I think that's what makes them great.
Yeah, precisely. All right. Well, without further ado, I've been Master of the Lemons, aka Lemmy,
And I'm here, the Japanese Train, aka Matt.
and thanks for watching, everyone.
Thank you.